The AMIC stood up in 2006 to meet the need for Headquarters Air Combat Command to execute major service acquisitions on behalf of the entire command. In other words, anything that exceeded the scope, capacity, or bandwidth of an operational contracting squadron, or that existed, or a requirement that existed at multiple bases across the command, became AMIC's purview. AMIC is a direct reporting unit. I report directly to the Deputy Commander for Air Combat Command, but more importantly, I respond to and support 422 men and women, officers, enlisted civilians, and contractors that are responsible for executing large-scale cradle-to-grave major services acquisitions on behalf of Air Combat Command. As I said, Acquisition Management Integration Center, the I is integration, and we fully live by that here in this organization, and that we're fully integrated in a multifunctional team. We have contracting and program managers supported by a host of enabling expertise to include human resources, finance, logistics, quality assurance, civil engineering, logistics, computers, all bringing their expertise to bear in all phases of major services acquisitions. Currently, AMIC's mission is to deliver responsive, cost-effective, mission-focused acquisition solutions that maximize joint warfighter capabilities. My thoughts on the use of incentive contracts: I believe it's a very important and critical tool in the acquisition toolkit. However, like most of the tools in the acquisition toolkit, need to be wielded appropriately. Incentive and award fee contracts are not a one-size-fits-all. My background with award fee type contracts goes back probably 15 years, and when I first came to AMIC back in 2008, AMIC used award fees and the subjective criteria very well, very appropriately. However, I think in the last decade, the award fee contracts or incentive fee contracts based on subjectivity or subjective measurement fell out of grace, and the acquisition system and bureaucracy kind of self-corrected to where it was very difficult to award an award fee contract or an incentive fee contract based on the subjectivity. But I believe now that that pendulum is swinging, and we're kind of hitting the sweet spot. In my organization in AMIC right now, we use very effectively award fee, incentive fee type hybrid type contracts to maximize benefit for our mission partner and enabling above and beyond type level of service, not above and beyond out of scope, but exceeding what our minimum objective thresholds or our minimum thresholds are for key service summary or key performance parameters. So overall, I'm very much supportive of incentive fees. I think they're important to get your customer or your mission partner on board from the get-go. I think that you need to be thinking of that as part of your acquisition strategy when you're doing market research under Part 10 and acquisition strategy development under Part 7. That starts with looking at the requirement, really understanding your mission partner's requirement, and then identifying the risks and opportunities in successful mission performance and developing potential key service summary items and key metrics that need to be measured, that you want to make sure you're measuring the right things. As somebody once said, what gets measured gets done. If you want to turn that a little bit, in an award fee type contract, what gets incentivized by the contractor. Obviously, that adds to their bottom line or their profit margin, so they're going to focus on that. The fear and concern is that you incentivize the wrong metrics that don't gain you any benefit for the mission partner, or that they become so heavily focused on by the contractor performing that it comes at the expense of other minimally satisfied or satisfactory type performance. So they've got to be used appropriately. At AMIC, we've used award fees very successfully. I can think in one of our major program divisions, our acquisition maintenance program division, we have 5 major different types of acquisition contracts that support aircraft maintenance, from RPA, remote piloted aircraft maintenance, T-38 program maintenance, Nellis aircraft maintenance, which provides back shop O&M level maintenance to all the aircraft at the Nellis Air Force Base. And in all those cases, we've used some form, fit, or fashion of award fees, whether they were purely award fee or whether a hybrid from award fee and incentive fee, in which we use both objective and subjective measures of performance to evaluate and to reward the contractor. I would say in those cases, largely, we've experienced about $500,000 or $500,000 in cost saving per year. in the T-38 program specifically, where we've incentivized aircraft availability, which is critically important for our mission partner. They need aircraft to fly and train, and so to have aircraft ready and maintenance free of any defects, and they can take off when they need to schedule their training. So aircraft availability is a critical component. Through the use of award fees, we've established a minimum threshold or a key service summary requirement, but then in the award fee plan, we've incentivized them to go above and beyond to an objective. And through that use of that tool, we've experienced in our aircraft fleet of T-38s the highest aircraft availability rate across the Air Force to include other services T-38 fleet. And that aircraft's 60 years old, so that's an example of where it's been very successful in AMIC. We have a lot of lessons learned and best practices. I've got some scar tissue as well over the last 30-some years. The first is engaging your mission partner, making sure they're involved in the upfront development of the acquisition strategy that may or may not include an award fee plan. And if you do have an award fee and an incentive fee plan, make sure that you include them as a key stakeholder, if not the fee determining official. Another lessons learned would be to make sure you only incentivize what's appropriate and to make sure that what gets measured gets done and what you really want to incentivize the contractor to perform over and above. The third thing I would say in terms of a lesson learned is you want to engage industry. And that's part of the DoD myth busting and being transparent from the requirement development and the upfront RFIs. Ask your industry partners and see what's in the marketplace in terms of how effective are incentive and award fees in your specific service acquisition, and is it appropriate? And then also ask them, what is an appropriate value? Here at AMIC, we've used around 3 to 5% of a total contract price or total contract cost as a fairly good benchmark, but again, we bounce that off industry. The caution I would give you there, the lesson learned, is if you provide too much of an award fee, you're giving away the farm in the sense that it may not require that much. For example, if a contractor's to earn 80% of $1 million award fee pool, is that what it really took for them to go and provide that excellent above and beyond level of service? Or would 80% of $100,000 provided them the same type of incentive to do that? And then finally, and last, would be the, again, multifunctional team being aggressive and proactive in the post-award administration in terms of collecting the data and surveilling the contractor and making sure you have credibility when you meet with the award fee determining an official and provide the contractor feedback at the end of the period of performance in terms of why you graded them and rated them the way you did.
Hi, I'm Kyle Lancour. I'm a contracting division chief and a contracting officer here at Air Combat Command Acquisition Management and Integration Center, ACC AMIC. I have 3 branches within my division spanning aircraft maintenance, precision measurement equipment labs, and intelligence service contracts.
Hi, I'm Steve Brannen. My background is program management, and I'm the division chief at AMIC for aircraft maintenance.
Today we'd like to talk to you about a contract type that we share in common. My contracting division provides all the support for Steve's aircraft maintenance contracts, and we'd like to talk to you about a contract type called fixed price award fee with performance incentives. We found a lot of success using this contract type, the way it optimizes contractors' performance and to the benefit of the government, and we think that it might have a lot of opportunities in your contracts as well. So we'd like to share with you some lessons learned and the way that we run those contracts. Before we get started, I want to talk to you a little bit about our organization, where we're located, and why we do what we do. Our special sauce, or the main reason that we're successful in our mission, is that we have both contracting and program management together in the same organization under the same director. Unlike a lot of contracting situations in which a requirement owner will bring a requirement to the contracting office and want to try to drop it off and leave it there and hope they get what they need, we are embedded together, working side by side down the hallway from each other in constant communication to ensure that we achieve the mission that we've been tasked. We also have a lot of functional support embedded within our organization: legal, human resources, communications, civil engineering. All can be matrixed into our multifunctional teams to ensure that we have a full complement of functional expertise for our contracts.
You know, Kyle, I've always thought that 2 things that really are our strengths. One is AMIC's commitment to training and education. And the other thing is the multifunctional team. That's really I think, where we make our money.
Yeah, I mean, we train each other, we train together. Contracting people can get program management certifications, and likewise, program managers can get trained in contracting, so we speak each other's language.
And then day to day, there's times Kyle's teaching me things about contracting. Hopefully, there's been times I've taught you something about program management.
Absolutely. So a little bit about our portfolio. Our primary mission partner is Air Combat Command and the Directorates. We're located here at the headquarters at Langley, so the A staff. We also support the tenant units and wings throughout the country, some combatant commands around the world, other Air Force major commands, and in some cases even partner nations. Our total portfolio exceeds $15 billion and is growing every year. You can see from this map here that our contracts support performance at over 210 contract performance locations in 61 countries around the world, oftentimes in war zones and in heavily trafficked drug areas. And so the success of our contracts are critically important to the safety of our nation and our interests around the world.
So today what we'd like to share with you is some of our experience with performance incentives and our award fee contracts. With that, we're going to talk a bit about acquisition planning, because that's very important, but with a special emphasis on requirements development, because that's a real key to your process. Then we're going to walk through one of our programs, one of our aircraft maintenance programs, the T-38 aircraft maintenance program, step by step through our incentive award fee process. We'll talk in a very overarching process about the award fee board itself. And then we'll close up with some best practices and lessons learned.
So before we dive into our examples, we thought it would be best to talk about how we weave incentive plans and planning for incentivizing contractors early into our process. So as you all know, acquisition planning is the early parts of our contract development, and we start that by identifying who the key stakeholders are, who our mission partners are, because ultimately they're the ones that are going to tell us what's important to them and what they need. Then we work with them to determine the purpose and the scope of the contract, what the high-level products and objectives of the contract are, and what the measures of that successful performance will look like. This is where it's important to start talking about incentives. What are those metrics, and would exceeding them be the benefit of the government? And if so, incentives are a powerful tool to get there. Another key input into our acquisition planning is a risk analysis, and Steve has a lot of experience doing those.
I do, and I'm a real believer in risk analysis. I'm afraid it's often the least used tool in our toolkit by some people. If you do a thorough risk analysis, you're going to identify those risks to the acquisition and the program, but along the way you're also going to identify some opportunities. And you use these to prioritize and develop your strategies to mitigate, control, or eliminate. But again, those opportunities could be an opportunity to apply an incentive. Particularly important with that risk, and breaking down a WBS and really breaking down that requirement, you can find through that process some evaluation criteria and, again, performance incentives. And if you do this right and you build it right, you should have continuity between that performance work statement, your service summary, delivery metrics, and your other acquisition documents to include that incentive plan. Now here we have an overarching view of building an incentive. Again, it's a sub-part of the requirements development process. And you're going to find the first three steps there are determine, draft, and seek. Those are iterative in nature, in that you can't really determine whether or not you're going to have an incentive and if it's a benefit to the government until you've done those things I just talked about. You've broken down that requirement through the work breakdown structure. You've identified those end products and outcomes and objectives. And once you've done that, you should be closer to identifying whatever your service summary delivery metrics are. Those things that are most key to your mission partner or requirement owner. Again, risk analysis, you put that piece in there, and you may find some incentive there. Once you have these things built, now you need to draft up an incentive plan. And with that, you're going to have to identify what are the roles and responsibilities, who are the participants in the award fee board, what's the timeline, what evaluation factors are you going to use, some may be objective, some subjective. You're going to have to identify an award fee pool. Through this process, again, it's iterative, you should be talking to industry. You should have your mission partner as a part of your team. From industry, we ask them the question, what would incentivize you? What's an incentive that you think would work with you. We consider their inputs and we begin to frame up that plan to the point we've polished it a little bit. Our leadership has looked at it. Now we have to get it approved. And we get approved by a fee determining official who has to approve the plan. From there, it's documented, it's attached to our acquisition documents, it becomes a part of our draft RFP, and then finally as a final RFP. Now to look at some specifics about our incentive award fee plan. Obviously, the specifics are laid out in that plan. We measure a combination of objective and subjective criteria. The performance is evaluated and recorded monthly. Our boards are semi-annual. And one thing we really stress, both in our plan and every time we have a board, we communicate that consideration for an award fee begins at zero. We're paying for satisfactory performance. An incentive award fee is for performance that would be above that. Within our board, we have, it's comprised of select stakeholders. They're most often associated with that arena of work, and in my case, aircraft maintenance. We'll have some of those. We'll also have, Kyle and I are usually a member of our award fee boards, our supervisors. These folks get together, data is presented, and the board itself makes a recommendation to the fee determining official. And this fee determining official has broad discretion. Once this person hears all the information, they could agree with the recommendation. They could decide that, hey, they felt like more fee was justified, or they could reduce that fee. And particularly important throughout this process is the CO and the PM should be providing that contractor ongoing feedback. There shouldn't be anything that's a surprise at a board.
And the fee determining official for us is someone that's not involved in the day-to-day management of the contract. We're looking for someone that's sufficiently removed, and in our cases, typically it's a 06 or a general officer or an SCS civilian equivalent that takes almost a third-party neutral look at both what's been provided by the contractor and what the government has recommended to them to ensure that we've complied with the incentive award fee plan and that it's fair to all parties. Another thing I'd like to point out is you hear us using the terms incentive and award fee somewhat interchangeably. So from an academic perspective, you've all probably learned that an incentive fee is more objective, quantitative type metrics, and if the contractor exceeds those or achieves those, they would earn incentive fee. Whereas an award fee would be more subjective, qualitative type feedback, and it would be a kind of range of possible outcomes depending on how the board determined. We found we originally used award fee plans when we started using incentives 15 years ago, and we found that it would be better to use some hybrid of both subjective and objective criteria. So we have a mixture of those in our plans, and so that's why we call it an incentive award fee plan. You won't find the contract type fixed price incentive award fee in the FAR. You're most likely to find fixed price award fee with performance incentives. And so what we've done is we've merged those together, and we find that it works quite well.
I mentioned the fee pool, and that's something you have to determine as a part of your plan. For us, and I think typically for fixed price contracts, it would be a percentage of those fixed price cleansed total. So you total them up and apply a percentage. And some would say, well, what's the right percentage? Well, it needs to be enough to incentivize industry. Well, how would you know that? How would you find that out? Well, one, that feedback that we were talking about, that you communicate with the industry, you share some of your documents with them. You may have some historical documents within your organization or a sister organization. There's different ways to do that. Now remember, you have to get the mission partner or requirement owner's buy-in because these folks are going to provide the funding. So you're going to justify the case for the incentive fee and for how much money it really is. For us here in AMIC, we found that somewhere between 3 to 5% works well for us. The example we're going to talk about today, the T38 program, its fee pool equates to 4% or really $400,000 each award fee period.
And an interesting nuance we've found as we've administered these contracts for years is that through competition, companies tend to reduce the fee or the profit that they propose under the contract because there's an incentive award fee pool available. So historically, we might have seen higher profit under a fixed price proposal. But as we've made additional money available through the incentive award fee, the contractors actually almost ceded their own predetermined profit in exchange for the profit that the government has some control over whether they earn or not.
Absolutely. That's a win-win for us. I can remember early on at AMIC, we would have contractors in aircraft maintenance, their profit fee would be anywhere from 6 to 8, 9%. Once we began down this road with these incentives, that lowered. We've had some come in with our profit fee as low as 2%. So it works. I want to back up just a second and talk about our aircraft maintenance contracts, because there's a point to be made there too. Within my division, we have 4 major programs. They're all mature, they're well-defined, they've been in existence 10 to 15 years. All of them are fixed price award fee with performance incentives. And again, there's 4 major programs, and I think each one of them are very interesting. The Aero Targets program is a program where we have taken retired F-16 aircraft, we have regenerated them and made them remotely controlled. We pair them down at Tyndall and out at Holloman Air Force Base with subscale drones. These aircraft, now called a QF-16, and the drones are fired out over the Gulf or over the desert out at Holloman. And we actually have DoD pilots and pilots from allied nations that come and actually employ their weapons and will actually shoot down these aircraft and drones. It's a great benefit for the pilots. They actually get to employ their weapons, and that's something they don't often get a chance to do, thankfully, but it increases their proficiency as pilots, so a very important program. Another program, remotely piloted aircraft, where we provide MQ-9 Reaper and RQ-4 Global Hawk drones. Their primary purpose is to support combatant commanders with a reconnaissance and strike capability, a very valuable asset. We provide the maintenance for this. Nellis Aircraft Maintenance and Support System out at Nellis Air Force Base, Las Vegas, well known for the home of the fighter pilot and the home of advanced fighter pilot training. We provide all the intermediate maintenance, or some refer to it as backshot maintenance, for that effort. We have over 800 contractor personnel working that. And finally, the T-38 aircraft program that I'm going to go into in a little more detail.
And I think something that's important to point out here is that all of these contracts are different in mission, and therefore all of their incentive award fee plans are different as well.
You're absolutely right. As you know, we've had trial and error on some of them. We've had to make adjustments. You can't treat them all the same, very distinct and different missions. So yeah, we've adjusted as we've gone on. The T-38 program itself, we have 63 T-38 aircraft. You know, these aircraft are 60+ years old, so it's amazing we're still maintaining them and flying them. We're flying them out of Beale, Langley, Tyndall, and Whiteman. We have a centralized repair facility out at Holloman Air Force Base, where these aircraft have to go for their major phase inspection and really extensive maintenance. The beauty of this program is we save the Air Force about $150 million a year. You know, how do we do that? Well, we use the T-38, which has a very low cost per flying hour, as a low-cost platform to substitute some of the B-2 and the U-2 pilots' training. And just for example, the T-38's cost per flying hour is $4,500 an hour. For the B-2, it's $35,000 an hour, and the U-2 is $22,000 an hour. The other use of the airplane is as an adversary air asset against the F-22 community. We discovered years ago that that community needed a low-cost target basically in the sky that's jet propelled, and the T-38 was perfect for that. They just need a target, and again, it's a very low cost per flying hour. So believe it or not, this is a really popular program within our command. It brings a lot of benefit. Now, talking in specifics about the T-38 incentive award fee plan, again, $400,000 available fee each period. The performance incentives we look at, the first area is purely objective. That's the services summary delivery metrics and the quality system. We weigh that at 50%. Then we have significant achievements. This is an arena you may have heard of, contractor or government award fee inputs. They're basically the same thing. This is where the contractor or the government can submit something they feel is above and beyond contract requirements, something special the contractor has done. We want them to bring those forth to us. We want to hear about them. We want to evaluate them, and we weigh that at 20%. We also have customer surveys. We weigh that at 10%. And then we have a tool that I'd like to talk about just a second that's called a special interest item. This is a tool we can use, and we can apply a percentage. In this award fee, we applied 20% as that weighted percentage. And this is when the government wants to put special emphasis on a particular item. You know, maybe it's an item that the contractor's having problems with, or it could be an area that, like maybe transition from one contractor to another, you know, when contracts change over. But we can manipulate that and use it in any area within aircraft maintenance we feel we need to. The beauty of it is it focuses that contractor's attention on that area. Now, we take these things I just mentioned during a board, we evaluate them, they're presented to the board, and the board makes an initial score on how well they feel like the contractor did that period. Now we have one other tool, or actually two other tools, that we can apply, and they are called significant incidents. There's both positive and negative significant incidents. For a positive, this is something that the contractor done that we feel is extraordinary. Maybe we've had to make a rapid redeployment OCONA somewhere to meet mission requirements. Or in the past year, for example, the contractors really had a challenge in operating in a COVID environment. Those are examples of positive significant incidents. Negative, on the other side of things, most often in aircraft maintenance, those have happened when the contractor has damaged aircraft or equipment. And that's not a good thing. I remember one instance where a contractor had technicians that were working on an airplane on a fuel system, took some wrong steps. They actually caught the airplane on fire, and it was significantly damaged. This provided the Air Force a mechanism to kind of go back in and say that was really bad, and greatly reduce their fee. So again, we evaluate those performance incentives first, but then the significant instance, they can take that and they could raise the fee in the case of a positive, they could lower the fee, or there could be zero fee if the board feels so compelled.
And from a contracting perspective, this ability to affect the contractor's earned fee is very efficient. And what I mean by that is normally when a contractor has a nonconformance, they miss a mission or they damage some government equipment, the contracting officer has the responsibility to request and negotiate consideration. And by having these routine, semi-annual, regular award fee boards, it streamlines some of that because we don't have to negotiate each and every one. We account for it at the award fee board. So it just makes things a little bit more efficient in that regard.
Now we'll take a look just at a general outline of our board process. There's a number of people in the room when we have these, everyone from like Kyle and myself, our COs, PMs, the contractor officer representatives, subject matter experts. We have the contractor there. There's a real crowd along with the board, usually about 20 people or so. But when it begins, the PM will give an overview, you know, of the agenda, what's going to happen there today. Then we provide the contractor an opportunity, and they know this ahead of time, to come make a presentation of what they've done well, the great things they've done, how they've measured up against our metrics, and so on. We try to limit that to 20, 25 minutes. You know, we don't want to go for them forever, but we want to be transparent, and we want to hear from them on where they think they've done well. With that, once they've concluded that, the PM will discuss the evaluation criteria that's contained within the plan, the results that we've gathered, and then we excuse the contractor because now it's kind of a government-only function. And usually the PM is going to make comments. He'll even make a recommendation of how he or she feels as to how the contractor performed that period. The CO may have comments and some of the SMEs. So all of this happens, is presented to the board. Now the board will begin discussions. And as I mentioned earlier, Kyle and I both are on several boards. And everyone just presents what they've seen, how they feel about it, how they would rate this. And it's often a very lively discussion, everyone presenting their views. And sometimes we have one member or another that really compels the board members, something that they didn't see or didn't see the value in. But at the end, the board makes a recommendation, as we said earlier, and it goes to the fee determining official.
Yeah, and it's chaired by our Deputy Director and 06 Colonel, and he helps broker those discussions, sometimes negotiations, but ultimately we go around the table and we vote as board members, and the chairperson makes sure that we come to a consensus.
Here's a look at our overall evaluation elements, some of the things I talked about in the last few minutes. You can see the service summary and quality has an available fee of $200,000, significant achievements of $80,000, customer survey $40,000, and special interest $80,000 for the total fee again of $400,000. In this particular period, we did have the special interest item, and it was the contractor's quality management system. We'll back up and take a look at these individually. The service summary, delivery metrics, and quality, that area, we calculate the results of that monthly. We use a point system for objective results. 18 points available for a 6-month period. 12 possible points are allocated for the service summary delivery metrics, and 6 points allocated for quality. And again, and you'll hear this throughout, they must exceed those contract minimums to earn points. Isolating service summary delivery metrics, possible 12 points on total and 2 points a month. Now they get 0 points earned for meeting all the service summary metrics. Now if they don't meet a metric, there's a -1 point taken away from them because they failed to meet the requirements of the contract. They did not meet a service summary metric. But here's where it gets a little interesting, where I think we've made our money. They can earn up to 2 points when their critical service summary metrics are met or exceeded. And I'll talk about those. There are 2 there that in discussions with the requirement owner, the mission partner, and just our background in aircraft maintenance, we felt were very important. The first one is total fleet aircraft availability. And we established a metric of 65% there. This is already aggressive in that an AETC, who has a great amount of T-38s, they're typically closer to 60% aircraft availability. But we established it at 65%, and then aircraft availability is probably for a pilot or an operator, that's their most important metric. That's how many aircraft are out on that ramp each day to fly. The more aircraft they have, the more flexibility they have, the more missions they can fly. So it's important to them. So we established a goal of 70%. Now when they can hit 70% or over, they earn 1.25 points a month. The second category there, or second metric, is average fleet time. Now this thing works hand in hand with aircraft availability. Average fleet time is a metric that measures how much time is remaining on each of those aircraft remaining to phase, and it's, again, an average. We've found that when it's managed well and acceptable, that's in a range somewhere between 205 to 260 hours remaining to phase. We've established a stretch goal of 225 to 245. That's the sweet spot. That's where you're really getting the most effective management. And this is a situation where it's just easy to think about. If your aircraft is not out on the flight line and it's back at Holloman Air Force Base at that SURF, having a major inspection that takes 45 to 60 days to complete on it, it's not available for the flight line. So we found that these are 2 very productive metrics for us. We call them stretch goals. You could look at it as a threshold and objective. For the average fleet time, each time they're able to hit that sweet spot of 225 to 245, they earn 7.75 points a month.
And it's very intentional that we only have 2 of these critical service summary metrics. You'll see on the next slide that we have roughly 8 other service summary metrics under the contract as basic PWS contract minimum requirements. However, for the purposes of the incentive award fee plan, we only selected 2, and these are the most critical. And this is where the multifunctional team and the communication among them becomes really important, because as a contracting person, if I were writing this contract in isolation and the program manager or the requirement owner was off, not involved, I would have no ability to do this. It's only because of Steve and his team's expertise that we're able to marry those 2 together and come up with a good plan.
So let's take a look at how the contractor did on the metrics overall. You can see by the fact that most things are colored green, they did very well. They were on time and accurate with their procedurals. their maintenance information system, the integrity of that information was below the metric. Trained, qualified workforce. They kept the repeat and recur discrepancies below the standard. They had no maintenance non-deliveries, which is where an aircraft is scheduled to fly and it doesn't make it. Engine holes, not a good thing. They did well there. They did have 2 cars issued, and as you'll notice at the bottom of this particular slide, there are 2 metrics that I talked about previously that we applied a stretch metric to. And they did very well on those. Now let's look at the results, within our plan. So the total fleet aircraft availability, you see, they did very well. They were above the 70%, for the whole 6 months, and that was great. So they picked up some points there. The average fleet time, hey, they met the metric as far as the standard metric, but they didn't quite meet the stretch goal. So they didn't earn points there. But overall, they did very well. They earned 11.25 points out of a possible 12. Now turning to quality management. The quality management system, there's 6 points possible, 1 point a month. This is determined by the number of corrective action requests that the government issues, and we don't want to issue cars. It's work on everyone's account. They're calculated monthly. 1 point is earned each month for no cars, 0 cars. 0 points are earned when there's 1 car issued. A minus a point when there's 2, an additional half point when there's 3 or more, and then we cap it at 2. And this may seem like a strange point system, but this is something particular with the aircraft maintenance programs. We've had to modulate a little bit depending on the size and scope and complexity of the effort. But this seems to be in a good spot for this particular program. And it helps us to limit the amount of cars we have to issue, and it improves the contractor's performance.
Yeah, for example, T-38 is roughly 150 full-time equivalents or people working under the contract. And we tried to take that plan and use it on our Nellis contract when that became a requirement for us. Well, it was 800 people. And just by the nature of increasing the contract, fourfold, it was unreasonable to expect them to only earn 2 cars before they started losing a bunch of points. Yeah. So we adjusted those and that threshold a little bit based on the scope and the magnitude.
It's got to provide an incentive. Yep. So this is a look at how the contractor did this period, and you can see they did very well. Largely, they did have the 1 month where they stumbled a little bit, but in the end, they ended up earning 4 points in this area. So taking a look at this category combined, in the end, they earned 15.25 points out of a possible 18. So 85% of that portion of the incentive fee was earned.
And I would say this was a really good period. Something we want to keep in our minds is we don't necessarily want to see 100% every time. And the reason I say that is because that means that our metrics perhaps are a little bit too achievable. They're not difficult. On the converse, we don't want to see them earning 0 points consistently because that means we've probably set the bar a little bit too high. So somewhere between 50 to 75 to 85, 90%, we're happy. We feel that we have a pretty achievable yet challenging goal.
Now let's go to significant achievements. I mentioned them briefly earlier, but they are again submitted by the contractor to the government. We do limit them to 5 submissions per period. They have to provide a tangible benefit. It can't just meet contract requirements. Now, it is work because they submit these. We have them submit the action, the impact, and the result, and that kind of thing. So they have to be evaluated, and our multifunctional team does that evaluation. Again, it's work. At the bottom of the screen, you'll see we have a rating scale that basically is just how good is it. Does it significantly exceed, slightly exceed, and so on. But we actually grade them out.
And this is where we get into the award fee portion of our plan.
Yes.
The previous section, the quality area, was very objective, incentive-driven, and now we're moving into the subjective award fee aspects.
Just some examples to share with you. In one situation, we had an aircraft with a cracked wing. Now, that's typically a depot function. The depot flies a team in, and they actually replace the wing. In this case, the depot, it was one of those years the budget was pretty tight, and the depot and our contractor worked together for the contractor to actually take on that repair responsibility. So it saved the depot travel funds. It got our aircraft back in commission, so we really appreciated that. In another situation, one of our avionics components, a directional gyro that support contract for it lapsed. We literally didn't have any, on the shelf, so to speak, and the contractor was able to develop and execute a repair and testing of the device. Again, kept our aircraft availability up. In another arena, there was a new GPS jamming device that the depot and the Air Force want to install in the cockpits, and you might think that just developing and manufacturing of brackets to install this device would be an easy thing. It's not. Our cockpits are very busy places. There's a lot of configuration control, not a lot of space, but our contractors came up with a methodology to do this, and so we appreciated that benefit. And finally, we entered a period where fuel cells weren't available from supply, and a common problem with them is blisters on the bladders. That makes them unserviceable. But our contractor came up with a pretty innovative repair, and it really kind of bailed us out for a while until the fuel cell assets were back in supply. So in the end, in this particular period for these kind of things, the contractor was awarded 75% of that possible fee for the significant achievements.
And this is where the rubber meets the road with an award fee, right? The contractor expended their own resources to achieve these. Oftentimes it's hiring additional people or working overtime at their own expense. If we didn't have this plan and the ability to reward them for that, they may not have taken the opportunity to do this for the Air Force. So all of these achievements are a direct result of the fact and the ability that we can reward them for it. It's a big benefit to the government.
Absolutely. Customer surveys. I think all of us throw up the prevent sign when you talk about surveys. None of us like to do surveys, but we need them from our customers. So we tried to make it as simplistic as we could. We have 3 basic questions. How well are they communicating and problem solving with you? How responsive are they to your mission needs? And basically, how effective were they at supporting your mission? And we ask them to just grade it from unsat to outstanding. We request them from our key mission partners, typically sent to 12 of them, again, rated from unsatisfactory to outstanding, -1 point on the unsat scale, up to 2 points on the outstanding. This is the actual results from one period, and you look at it and say, wow, they only got 61%. Well, there's good and bad with that. We don't want to get bad surveys. The contractor doesn't want to get bad surveys or less than outstanding, but it can reveal issues and problems. Sometimes it's just a communication problem. But what does it do when you get a report like this? Well, it'll focus both that contractor PM and the government PM on what's wrong, what happened. What happened at that location that they didn't meet your requirements, it wasn't satisfactory. So it's still a great tool to use. It takes work, though.
Yeah, your PM's work, I imagine you send out quite a lot of these and you don't get them all back initially. So we have to claw.
Yes. Yes, you have to nag them, basically. You can certainly do it politely and diplomatically. When I was out on site visits, I would always sit down with the commanders and at some point talk to them about how important this was. And we were able to get their support largely.
And this is another area that you can tailor your incentive and award fee plans as well. Most of our contracts have customer surveys, but some of them don't. And the reason, at least our reason behind not including them occasionally is T38 spans across multiple geographic locations. So the contracting officer, the program manager can't be in all those locations at one time. And while we have cores, sometimes it's nice to hear directly from our mission partners what they're thinking performance is looking like. Our Nellis contract exists at one location, one base. We have one primary mission partner, and we actually have AMIC personnel stationed there with them. So we feel we have a pretty good finger on the pulse of how Nellis is performing. So in that plan, we don't have customer surveys, but for our ones that are throughout the world and in multiple locations, we find it's a valuable tool.
And I mentioned the one tool we like to use, the special interest item. Again, in this case, it was for the quality management system. Before that award fee period, we share with the contractor. We say, hey, we're coming to look at this. Here's exactly what we're going to look at. It's important to us, and that's a good thing. It forces them to focus on it. And as you can see, we lay out in specifics what we're going to look at. The contractor did very well for this. This particular one was a pass-fail kind of thing, and they passed in all areas.
And a lesson learned we have on special interest items are make sure you define, like we have here, what does successful performance look like. You don't want to get into the board and realize that it wasn't clear what they were supposed to achieve. And the other thing is you need to notify them what the special interest item is before the period starts. We've had accidents in times before where we realized we want to do a special interest item after the period had started, and that's not really fair. So oftentimes if that happens, we do it bilaterally with agreement on the contractor, but best practice is to, before the period starts, lay all that out and determine it unilaterally.
So this is a look at the results at the end of the board. I think they did very well. 85% for the service summary and quality, 75% for significant achievements, 61% for customer surveys, and by virtue of passing everything on the special interest, they got 100%. So really, 86% of $400,000, I think it really provides them an incentive.
So Steve's done a really good job of laying out how we walk through the actual day of the board, the 2 or 3 hours that we're sitting in the room going over the results. But it takes a lot of work to get there. So we're providing this flow chart as just a graphical representation, a notional representation of all the steps it goes through to get ready for, conduct, and resolve after the board. And so one of those long lead items that you start preparing quite a while before the board is those significant achievements, those CAFEs and GAFEs. We all know what it's like to write an appraisal the day it's due and not having taken any notes throughout the year. These CAFEs and GAFEs, we pull and push and look for feedback throughout the period. So early on, we're expecting those to start coming in as they happen. Because once they come in, we go through a vetting process. The PM reviews it. He farms it out to a SME. If it's a logistics-related significant achievement, we don't want to just review that by ourselves. We get in the right expertise to make sure that it, one, exceeds what the government's requirement is, and two, what the magnitude of that value is. Is it a very good achievement? Is it a good achievement? Or is it outstanding and a significant achievement? And so we work through that process. We compile all of those. The program manager sends out invitations, coordinates physical space, invites the contractor. They typically fly in for the meeting. We prepare binders or iPads sometimes with all of the information to prepare the board members so they're not asking unnecessary questions at the board. They can read the award fee plan and be familiar with it. They can look at the CAFEs and GAFEs, the significant achievements, and they can look at the report from the PM who kind of summarizes what the period looked like. That way they come in informed and ready for the board. We conduct the board. Again, it ranges from 1 to 3 hours in length. Afterwards, the recommendation is sent up to the fee determining official. The fee determining official decides whether to approve or adjust what's recommended, sends a memo to the contracting officer who modifies the contract, obligates the funds so that the contractor can invoice. And then we start the process all the way over again.
And it's a lot of work. Early on we had the slide, determine if it's of benefit to the government. It's a lot of work here. Our experience is it has been beneficial.
And then this slide is just given to you as a notional semi-annual schedule, giving you notional dates at which point you should be making certain actions in order to be ready for your boards. Okay, and here's a notional schedule, semi-annual schedule of dates and approximately where you should be in your preparation for the board at any given time in a 6-month period. So we spent a lot of time talking about aircraft maintenance because it's really important. Steve will tell you that, and I believe that as well. But there's also other contracts here at AMIC that we incentivize, and they're slightly different than aircraft maintenance. So to help kind of get your brain juices flowing and thinking about your contracts, you may not have aircraft maintenance contracts. I want to tell you about some other incentives and to get that creativity going. So another contract that we have in my division that has an incentive plan is called Precision Measurement Equipment Laboratories, PMEL for short. And what that contract does is it takes precision measurement equipment, think torque wrenches and scales and other things like that, that are used for aircraft maintenance, and calibrates them. If you're putting a wheel onto a plane or onto a car and you're using a torque wrench to try to tighten it down and it's supposed to be tightened to 50 pounds of pressure, and your torque wrench tells you it's using 50 pounds, but it's actually putting 100 on, that's going to cause damage. And so the PMEL takes that wrench and calibrates it to make sure that it's putting out what it actually is supposed to. What we focus on in that contract is two types of incentives, a quality incentive and a schedule incentive. Within the quality arena, we focus on the QMS, like aircraft maintenance. Are they actually calibrating it correctly? And we look at their calibrations and maintenance processes. What's their standard process like? And then also whether the laboratory maintains AFMET-CAL certification. And AFMET-CAL is a centralized Air Force authoritative source that determines whether the lab is certified to calibrate equipment or not. We also look at schedule. These are tens of thousands of pieces of equipment at each lab each year. And so getting things done quickly is very important. And while the equipment is in the lab for calibration, it's not being used. So we look at turnaround time and throughput. Turnaround time measures how long a piece of equipment sits in the lab for calibration. If the contract standard is 10 days and they do it in 5, that's a benefit to the government, getting it back out to the field. So we're trying to drive down the turnaround time. Throughput. This measures how many pieces of equipment are pushed through the lab and calibrated every year. If they calibrate 10,000 pieces and the contract standard is 9,000, that's a benefit. We got more pieces of equipment through in a given period, so we're trying to drive up throughput. Another contract type that historically has been difficult to incentivize is advisory and assistance services, knowledge-based services, people thinking in an office. The reason this is more difficult than aircraft maintenance and PMEL is where aircraft maintenance and PMEL have very discrete, tangible products, results, aircraft in the sky, equipment out on the flight line for use. ANAS is people thinking. And so how to measure that and incentivize them to exceed minimum contract requirements has been challenging in the past. But we've done a lot of research, we've done a lot of analysis, a lot of discussions with industry and trying different things on some of our contracts, and we think we've come up with a fairly successful model. The first part is we look at QPI, quality performance. Like aircraft maintenance, we're measuring how well they're doing their job. Are their reports accurate, on time? But the two kind of unique incentives are our vacancy rate incentive and retention turnover incentive. What we're looking at with vacancy rate incentive is how many days out of a given year is that position vacant. If there's 365 days in a year and the position's vacant for 90 days, that is a quarter of the year that no work is being done. So our vacancy rate incentive tries to drive down vacancy. We pay the contractor more to have fewer days vacant. Retention turnover incentive measures how many times in a given period a position gets vacated and replaced. So if in a given year a single position is owned by 8 different people, it's very difficult to get any work done because we all know how long it takes to get started in our jobs, getting your ID card, getting your computer, getting familiar with the work that you're supposed to be doing. What we're trying to do with retention turnover incentive is to drive retention up and turnover down. We want people to stay longer so we don't have that time where we're trying to fill positions and teach them their job or get them familiar with their job again. It's very difficult for me to think of a contract that could not be incentivized.
I agree.
So go into it that mindset. You may not be worth the incentive. It might be too administratively burdensome and you may not have the right interaction between program management and contracting to achieve it. But I could think of probably an incentive for almost all of the contracts the DoD writes.
Some best practices and lesson learned. We've hit on it several times, but incentivize only the most important metrics. You want them to focus on particular areas. Define the metric, how it be measured, and the frequency. They need to understand this. It needs to be clear.
And include a special interest item. You want to be able to adjust the incentive as the contract develops, matures, evolves, or if the contractor is having particular performance issues you want them to focus on. And include the mission partner in your award fee review board. On our voting panel, we have at least one member from the directorate or the mission partner that can give that boots on the ground mission partner perspective.
You need to seek industry input on the metrics and the pool amounts. They're a part of our partnership. You need their feedback. And you know, a really positive thing that some contractors do is they share their earned fee with the workforce. I'll tell you just a quick story about that to show you how it can motivate people. I was visiting one of our sites and I was visiting with a contractor program manager and the business manager. We were having a discussion, we were nearly done, and one of the workers for the contractor came up and wanted to speak to the business manager. And so they stepped aside and went to his office, and a few minutes later they came out, and the business manager walked up to me with a big smile and he said, "You won't believe what that discussion was about." And I said, "What?" He said, well, during the last award fee period, that particular person was the reason we were issued a corrective action request. And our policy is if you do something negligent and cause us a car, then we're going to suspend you from participating in sharing that earned fee. And that gentleman was there to find out when his suspension was up. So it can be a powerful motivator.
And as we talked about earlier, be careful not to put too much weight on cars and QPI. Adjust your threshold for what's an acceptable amount of corrective action request based on the size and magnitude. And don't put too much weight on that aspect of performance, because when money is tied to cars, it can become somewhat tenuous, and we don't really want to argue, and sometimes it can devolve into arguing every car, and we want to stay away from that.
Remember to continuously evaluate, and don't be afraid to adjust as necessary. You know, study it for a period or two, but if an adjustment is needed, make it. It has to incentivize.
And to achieve that, include a unilateral right in your plan to revise the plan. Within our plans, we include a clause that within 15 days prior to the beginning of the period of performance, the government can unilaterally adjust the plan to make it better fit our needs.
Takeaways: incentives can work to the benefit of the government. They really can. You've heard us both speak to it. Believe in the team approach. Don't be like me when I first started in program management and tried to take on too many things. I tried to take care of things that a supply expert should have done or someone else. Believe in that team, use their talents, and you'll get more done.
Start planning early. Once the contract is awarded, it's a little too late to start thinking about how you're going to incentivize the contractor. And engage the mission partner and industry as you're developing that plan, because we all have to live with it, or we all will live with it after it's awarded.
Yeah, again, monitor that performance continuously and give feedback. You know, we need to be transparent, give timely feedback. You know, evaluate the results of what you're doing, and as we've mentioned, adjust as necessary.
And this whole process of going through the incentive award fee board preparation, it's really a good building block for CPARs because we have the data on how the contractor has performed, so it won't be a surprise whenever we go to give that official evaluation for the contractor. There's been a lot that we've covered today. Some of it might be new, some of it may be old news, but we wanted to make ourselves available. If you'd like to reach out and ask any clarifying questions or look for templates or examples of how we do this stuff, we'd be happy to share. So we're providing our names and emails. Please feel free to reach out.
Yep, glad to help.
Thank you.